Hi everyone, one more time. Welcome to one more podcast and one more talk with us at Ultrax. Today we have two experts from Vald Performance System. These are Luciano Tomaghelli and Sebastjan Potokar. They are both working with Vald, as I mentioned before, and we here in Croatia with our system, we are collaborating a little bit with the whole equipment that they have, and I'm very grateful for you guys for the equipment that we can have the experience and opportunity to test it and to use it in our daily practice. And thank you one more time, Sebastjan, for your invitation and coming to Croatia and Zagreb to show us some specialties about the whole system. And before we start, speaking about the Vald performance and about the equipment that you are having in your system, I think that the best thing is that you guys introduce yourself a little bit, who you are, what is your background, and I think that this will be the best option. And maybe we can start with Luciano, because he's older one, not too old, but he's the oldest one here. So let's start with him. Hi, one more time, Luciano.
Hi, Marco. Thank you very much for having us. Like you mentioned, my name is Luciano. I'm based in Argentina. I've been in the industry for a little more than 15 years now. I hold a degree in a bachelor in physical activity and master's in biomechanics. I had the pleasure and the possibility to hold several roles along my career, from strength and conditioning coach to biomechanist, performance analyst with Olympic sports, and I also worked in the industry as a general manager and head of sales. So have developed an established relationship with several practitioners worldwide. Now with Vald, my role is basically as client success manager. So the idea is to assist all clients to get the most out of their systems, either from how to use them in the operational sense, but as well as to understand metrics, interpretation, and how to apply them. Share any specific research and applicable case studies that may help them, to gain better insights and, essentially get the most out of their systems, right? So that's in a nutshell, my experience. Like I mentioned before, I worked for several companies, including video analysis companies like Darfish, GPS tracking technology like Catapult. So I'm pretty experienced across different product verticals when it comes down to the sports technology stack.
It sounds like a great experience, and you change a lot of different aspects of our profession. So you were a strength conditioning coach, performance analyst. Sounds pretty interesting. But before I start asking you a little bit, I have already one question about it, because I'm pretty interested in. I would like to ask Sebastjan to introduce himself a little bit more.
Yeah. Hi guys, thanks Marco for having me as well. I'm a physiotherapist. I have bachelor's in physiotherapy as well as master's in musculoskeletal physiotherapy. I have 5 years of experience working in physiotherapy as a private practitioner, as well as I spent the last 3 or 4 years now already working with handball club here in Slovenia. So I have also some experience with sport, and for the past year and a half, I've been also working at Vald as a business development management. Basically, I'm a representative of company for, let's say, Southeastern Central Europe. So for all countries of former Yugoslavia, Romania, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. So yeah, I have quite a big region to get around, but
Big region to cover.
Yes.
And quite interesting region, I can say.
Yeah.
And what happened yesterday with the handball team? You watched the game?
Yeah, I watched it, and yeah, unfortunately, it kind of fell apart, or we had a series goal. It was just amazing. I think
Yeah,
he had
I fo-
percentage more than 50%. So
yeah, I
this
follow
is
you guys also. I like your coach is pretty buffed. You know, he's all the time on the line. So I follow also your games, all of your games, handball games.
yeah,
Yeah, this is good. That's why I would like. That's why I wanted to have you both here, because we have Luciano, who is a strength conditioning coach. He was performance analyst, general manager of sales, and everything. And you are a physiotherapist. So I think this is a great combination of knowledge and experience, and we can speak more holistically about the whole approach. But before start, I have one question with for Luciano about his roles. You mentioned Luciano, performance analyst, strength conditioning coach, and so on. So my question is, what do you like? Well, not what do you like the most, or what is the difference between performance analyst or strength conditioning coach? Because I know that here in Croatia and in Balkan countries, when you say performance analyst, people usually don't know what this means. Because I know, because I was also performance analyst in the previous club I worked. So can you tell us more from your perspective, what does this role mean?
Sure. So I think that the main differences between the two roles is that the strength conditioning coach, and let me make a little stop there as well. To use something, Marco, I've been teaching at university level for 10 years as well. So I have, teaching experience.
Yeah, perfect.
Bridge a gap in a lot of these situations.
Yeah.
So going back to your first question, the strength and conditioning coach is going to be mostly centered on developing physical capacities according to the demands of the sports and individual requirements from each, athlete, if you may say, right? That's the main core, in my opinion, aspect of the role. Whereas performance analyst, like the word mentions, it's around analyzing performance, right? So in your sport, what makes you win, what makes you lose, right? So for example, when I was working for the Canadian Sport Institute, I was part of the performance analysis team, right? But focus on the biomechanical aspects of movement, right? We're looking at which biomechanical determinants were important for the sport of luge. That was from the biomechanics perspective. But also we did a lot of data analysis on different luge tracks to understand where were the critical sections of each track, right? So for example, if you go to compete to a track like Koenigsegg in Germany, which are the hardest parts of the track, right? So that's part of like the performance analysis role, if you wish. I think there's different, verticals where you can consider performance analysis. One could be from the, notational results understanding.
Notation analysis, technical, tactical, biomechanical, yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's the main, differences, right? S&C coaches are not so much concerned, I think, on the result itself, but more the process, right? The process, the methods, and the way to, how do we get our players to be fit, strong, faster, whatever are the demands of the sport, right? Because not all the sports have the same demands.
That's it. Yeah, perfect. I think that this was a clear differentiation between now strength conditioning coach and performance analyst, and I think our listeners will understand what is the difference and how complex can be the role of performance analyst, because you can analyze the athlete, you can analyze the game or the demands from different kind of aspects, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and let me share one more comment around that. The main questions when we talk about performance analysis, the questions that we need to try to answer are performance related questions. and that normally comes from the coaching staff. So when I did my master thesis with Lush, all the hypotheses that I wanted to check came from hypotheses that the coaches had on what made a better or worse Lush start, right? So we didn't have any scientific data to back up, what they thought was good, great or bad. And essentially what we did was check those hypotheses through a scientific method approach.
I think I can understand it pretty well, and this is good. You are combining, art of coaching with science. So you try to help the coaches when they have some question. I know, why do we fall down? Let's say in football, how we are doing these things, and in soccer in Europe. If you are falling down with your, I don't know, some kind of possessions, or if you're falling down with your capacities, and during the last 15 minutes of a game, you try to explain why maybe this is happening, and you can check this from the biomechanical, technical, tactical, physical, anatomical, physiological perspective. I don't know, when you try to give them the answers, what is happening with the body. I think this is something that should be a lot more present here in Croatia and in Balkan countries, because we need a lot of answers on these questions. I remember back in Dinamo, when we were working there, this was one of our main goals, trying to answer on a lot of this type of questions for the whole system. So it was like something like, how many minutes should we train before a game, or how many total distance should we have on a first day of a week, or should we do strength training before training session or after a training session? That it depends on the training method, type of contractions. So you get a picture. So a lot of questions, and we need to answer on them. And yeah, quite large area.
Yes, it is. I think the key question there as well is defining performance. Okay. That's a tricky one, and how factors are associated with performance in sports that what we typically call the typical sports that do not involve a decision-making situation, like track and field, like winter sliding sports. Those sports where physics is purely the answer, right? Because you gotta be faster, right? Maybe defining performance is a bit easier. But when we talk about sports where there's decision making, like soccer, like football,
that's it.
Maybe you are the team that has had the least possession in the game, and it's a team that you took less amount of shots to the goal, but you ended up winning the game, right? And that's when
you win the game. Yeah,
and that's when things get tricky to explain, right?
That's complex one. We always make fun of it. You can do a lot of things, professionally structured, but until the end, like you said, you have 80% of the possession and you lose the game, or you have more shots on the goal, but you still lose the game. So it's a bit tricky, but we need to find the answers on the performance related factors. So that's good. So to get back, Sebastjan, to you, so let's and to Vald system. So my question is, how this physiotherapy knowledge helped you, when you're working with the Vald equipment, and before that, maybe what is the idea, of the Vald? What is the goal of the whole project?
Yeah, well, goal of the whole project, Vald, we are producing systems to measure human performance and also to track the progress of rehabilitation. But more importantly, not only we produce systems, but we also produce software to store data, analyze data, provide feedback, biofeedback to the patient, to the practitioner. You can share this data with your doctor, your team manager, whoever. Depends. Either you're using us from the performance or health perspective. And kind of goal of the company is to get more into this health sector now, to basically provide as a whole hub around treat a patient from the first day he comes into your practice and to the day he is discharged. So you can create notes, you can follow up, to use the devices as a part of treatment, as part of training. And mostly in our region, in the Balkans, especially in the public health system, we are still not quite there, I guess, to what like modern developed healthcare systems in the world, like Australian, Dutch, Scandinavian, US systems are doing. We are probably still 20, 30 years behind. But hopefully I can also help that we move along and maybe move towards more passive treatment approaches in physiotherapy to more active, because it is also why VLAD stands for. We can track, we provide objective data, we create norms, and with this objective data, you can clearly track also the progress of rehabilitation. And there is so many ways in which we could expand, like we could cooperate with insurance companies, because you can also track how many hours you actually need of physiotherapy for rehabilitation or certain injury. Or also you could track how many days of work you actually save, because you can get patients back to work quicker than before, because you were just guessing basically about the strength of the performance in the rehab process.
Yeah.
There's quite a big aspect of what we can do.
So it's not just the sports, you are also helping people about their, like let's say some companies, and you're helping them to check their health, because we know a lot of now in today's world, we are all rushed up and we have a lot of obligations. So sometimes we forget about our health. So it's good to check it from time to time. So this is also a great aspect. So from the sports to the health, and you mentioned already some of the customers and some of the regions that you are working with VLAD equipment. Can you tell us more with who else you are working and with who else you are having some kind of collaboration with the whole project?
Well, in this region we have mostly, I still have clients that come from performance, as it's the same across the globe. Like when VLAD first started, they only had performance clients everywhere, and now we start to go more and more also into health or into smaller clients. Let's say across the world, we are working with all 20 teams of the English Premier League, let's say 15 teams of Spanish La Liga, I guess 14 teams of the German Bundesliga, and so on. In the US, like NBA, NFL, MLB, we are everywhere. And in my region, probably my biggest client would be either the Romanian football clubs like Steaua, Cluj. Then in Serbia, we have a great relationship with Serbia. And I think this is a great starting point also in that region. And it helps when you get the biggest performance teams to be your clients. Then when you're talking
definitely
practitioners, you know who else is using you. Us in this country is like the biggest club that you can support. So it's a great reference point as well.
Yes, you're covering different continents here, and this is a great starting point from everybody here in Croatia and in Balkan to hear that you are working with the best professionals in the world. So I think this is telling something definitely.
Yeah.
And do you have also one question maybe for both of you guys, maybe Luciano, about you mentioned also some projects that you participate with the VLAD and also with different clubs. Do you have any kind of collaborations like that with these clubs, or you are working on some kind of research also with them, or?
Yeah, so at the moment we are conducting a number of studies with amateur rugby union teams. So we're looking, it's nothing, let's say new, but in rugby union, the most frequent non-contact injury is hamstring injuries, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing a number of studies to understand the eccentric hamstring strength of amateur rugby union players throughout different teams. and we want to understand what are the differences between players who have had a history of hamstring injuries and players who haven't. So we want to see if their values are back to normal, and if that is one of the reasons why we see so many reincidences, right? Like re-injuries. We're also doing another study where we're looking at to understand the sensitivity of different tests. What happens when we do an isometric test versus an eccentric test? Because previous research shows us that one of the most effective aspects after a hamstring injury is a significant loss in eccentric strength, which puts you in a little bit of a very dangerous loop, because low eccentric hamstring levels plus a history of hamstring injuries plus short bicycles, that's going to lead into a new injury, right? So then you enter into a loop of never, exactly, having that athlete back to normal. That's very well explained in a paper by Five from 2013, if I recall exactly. There are neuromuscular inhibitions that happen after hamstring injury, and we're looking at those hamstring strength level in players who had injuries as far back as 4 years ago. So I think it's going to be a very interesting one. And we're recently, done a validation of handheld dynamometer with a soccer team as well. So, we do a lot of collaboration on the applied aspect of all technology.
As you mentioned, now already the dynamometer and everything. Well, I will get back to this research, because I also done something similar. It was not a typical research, but it was we test one group of soccer players, from different ages. And we check these kind of things, as you mentioned, isometric strength, eccentric strength. I tried to combine a lot of different aspects from ForceFrame, DEX, and plates to see what will I get. And we also noticed, we checked the training history and age history, and also previous injuries. And the conclusions were, let's say that from 15 players from ages from 2006 to 2009, you have like 80% of them have some kind of previous injury that is not like a small one, it was serious one. And when you check the values and when you compare it on the dominant and undominant leg, and when you compare it with the previous injury, it's something on the track, as you mentioned. So it's quite useful to have something like this in your facility. You can check it immediately what is happening with this guy.
Sure.
And to get back to equipment, to speak more about it. So at Vald Performance, guys, what kind of equipment do you have, and what kind of technology you are using? We mentioned dynamometers, we mentioned ForceFrame and force plates, and what else is there?
Well, we also use basically the photo cells or the speed gauge systems to measure speed. You can also measure agility and reaction speeds. Then we have also a system for video analysis of the range of motion and other movement capacities, such as balance. And we also have actually a free tool for exercise program prescription. So you can reach out to your patient or your clients and just prescribe them a training program, and they can do it themselves at home. These are probably thermometers such as dynamo, ForceFrame, let's say NordBall as well, and the force plates. Those are the main technologies that we offer.
And there is you connect, and you connect a lot of different aspects. The speed training, the strength training, you have the hub, so we have the solution where you connect all of the data on one place, and you can prescribe the programs. Am I right?
Yeah, basically this is probably our biggest power, is that either you start with only one system, and when you have them all the data that you ever record for a single athlete or participant goes towards his profile on the cloud.
Go to this software,
You can analyze everything. And we also record like especially on our force plate, force decks. We record hundreds of parameters. And let's say,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, you only have 4 at the moment. And then at some point in time in the future, you will read a paper that it's also useful to check some specific parameter.
That's it.
I guess surely we have it. Because all the data is on the cloud. You just select it and it gets calculated automatically for a full history of this client. And you can just make it also more specific. And then maybe you have another new insight on either his performance or rehab process. Yeah, wherever it's this. So this is also probably the biggest trend, is data and the analysis options that we offer.
That's amazing. So you mentioned like 6 to 7 different systems, and all of the data collected with these 6 or 7 systems you are putting in one software, so we have all the data in one place. I think these types of softwares and hubs will be the future in sports. In some regions definitely already is. In Croatia and in Balkan we are a little bit still not on that level, but I think we are going in that direction. We are still a little bit on Excel, Words, Dropbox, and all of these kind of aspects, but
certainly
we try to promote. Yeah, we try to promote this kind of softwares and this kind of work, so you can collect all and save all of the data from these different parameters to one place. So this is great.
Certainly, yeah. And that's also like what the things we are talking about might seem overwhelming. All right, you have like tons of data, you have them all on one cloud, and now what should you do with it? And this is also the strength of the service, I think, because when you get our systems, so I am the representative for my region, but then you also have guys like Luciano that are client managers or basically support guys. So we help you, we get you onboarded, how to actually use the systems, how to use the cloud, how to make analysis. If you want to have an idea about what test battery to use in different occasions, these guys know it all, and have unlimited number of sessions with them. And we have some really amazing stories and feedback from our clients, because they were like, all right, I got the systems, I didn't know how to use them actually, but then through time, through our sessions, it all makes sense. Maybe Luciano has more experience in this, because that's his job as well.
Yeah, so besides just the equipment, you are also giving the support all the time, and with the education, and this is also important. And I know I already talked with you two guys, I already talked with Scott, and you helped me a lot with the whole system and the establishment of the equipment. We spoke about the variables, we spoke about different interpretations, we spoke about the hub. So this was very helpful for me and my guys here in the gym. So we mentioned dynamos, ForceFrame, force plates, groin bar, and so on, air bands. I would like to speak more about the NORBOARD, the device that gets a lot of attention in the papers and in the sports, especially in the team environments. And can you tell me more about, what is the idea, what kind of testing protocols you have inside, maybe some kind of application or battles when you are using this equipment in team settings, or maybe with individual athletes and in rehab, let's say Sebastjan in the physiotherapy meeting, or maybe Luciano in the rugby meeting, what kind of challenges you are facing with that. So maybe Luciano, you can tell us more.
Sure. The NORBOARD was the company's first product. It was developed, back in 2014. It came out of a research from David Olbert's group, and that's how the concept was born. So essentially, there's a significant amount of literature that associates hamstring strain injuries with a reduced eccentric hamstring strength in a knee dominant exercise like the Nordic hamstring, right? As you may know, there's literature that shows that, introducing the Nordic curve reduces, the possibility of hamstring injury significantly. So the Nordic itself It's not something new, right? It's something has been around the Nordic exercise since the 19th century, right?
That's it.
But it's been given a lot of attention, given the potentially preventive factor, not predictive, right? Because we're not going to be able to predict an injury, but we may be able to keep our players free from injury, right? Which I think is the important part as well, right? So the Norwood essentially,
Definitely.
yeah. So with the Norwood, essentially what we're going to be doing is measuring eccentric hamstring strength. There are different protocols because we can do either a Nordic curl or a razor curl, or we can also do a custom test, like for example, a good morning being kneel on the Norwood, right? So you can measure, a hip dominant exercise, or you can measure a knee dominant exercise, or a combined one like the razor, right? Then we can also perform isometric protocols, right? And there's two very important things that the Norwood has. One is that we have a lot of normative data, tons of normative data from teams and leagues around the world, so that if you want to make a comparison of apple to apples, you can actually do that. And second, the device is like very comfortable and it's very quick, to perform the test. This study that I'm mentioning, that we're comparing isometric protocol with force plates against the Norwood. It takes us around three times more time to measure on the force plate compared to the Norwood. So in a team setting, that's very important. When you don't have a lot of time and you need to, be very efficient, that's very important.
Fast, yeah.
Yeah, and with the Norwood, we can do things, very quickly with very good reliability, right? And the one thing that I would, comment, like I said before, if you're new to measuring, right? If you're new to assessing and diagnosing, it's a process, right? It's a process that takes time. And if you need to build your own database to understand what is high, what is low, what is normal, what is abnormal, that's a challenge, right? Because it takes time to build that data set. And like I said, having normative data from, the top leagues around the world allows us to actually, tell a practitioner, hey, listen, if you have this player, with, for example, 300 units of combined bilateral force, well, he is below average, close to 30% to what the standard European league would look at, right? So that allows us to get, a better insight about that data. I'll give you an example. We did a little project with a league in South America where we tested 210 football players, so soccer players.
Oh, nice.
70%, 70%, right? 70% of those players were below the normative threshold that we have from European leagues, right? So, 7 out of 10 players did not have sufficient hamstring eccentric strength compared to European players. And it's very frequent that, players from South America are going to go play in Europe. And as we know, soccer in Europe, in the European League, is more intense. There's more high field running. Yeah, there's more high field running. There's more explosive actions, and that puts a lot of strain in the hamstring. So you got to be prepared, right? So that allows us to, perform a pretty good diagnostic of the situation.
And what is also important in Europe, you're playing a lot of games these days. You can have I know one team right now, they will have 4 games in 10 days. So you have 2 days per week, so you need to be resilient to one game, but you need to recover. You need to play game with the same demands, with the same intensity. So it's pretty important. I'm glad that you mentioned this project, because I didn't have 210 players, but I have 15 of them, and we noticed the same thing. Here, it was one Croatian football school. We took one group. It was 15 players of men team. So from 14 to 17 years old. I already mentioned what kind of injuries they have. So this was like 5. We have 5 hamstrings. Most of the mechanism was in sprinting. We have, I think, like 3 adductors, 4 back pains, 3 knees. So a lot of two break bones, like fibia on the lower leg. So it was a quite serious. Once you can agree, Sebastjan. So this is something that is maybe not a good trend. But when I analyze the data and when I take your values and reference values from the Vald Hub, we also noticed that I think that 90% of them were below 15 percentile or around, and they were below the values that you recommend. So this, when you are comparing with the ages, I think it's something like from 350 to 400 newtons, if I'm right. And when you check it, we notice that some of them with 70 years old, or maybe they are going to maybe next year participate with the senior teams, they have like 300 newtons or even below. And also what we noticed that it was that the injured leg, the values were lower than on the not injured leg, and mostly the injuries occurred on a dominant leg. So this is something we didn't check any, like use some statistical manner, but you can see the trend. And when you compare it with the values, when you compare it, okay, the left side, right side, this was injured, this was not, this was dominant, you can see the trend, what is happening there. So it's quite important to check these things, especially now because it's the preseason. You will finish the preseason, you will start with the season. You need to know what are the good values if you want to compete in this competition.
Certainly. And, there's a lot of talk recently of, what's the abnormal symmetry, right? 10%, 15%. And that's I think that's a pitfall that many practitioners are doing, because that's a very context-related question, right? If I have
it depends.
Yeah, it depends. I have a kid who is 18 years old. He weighs 80 kilos. He has 300 newtons on one leg. He has 240 on the other one, right? We have a 20% asymmetry, right? Already his strength values are below normal. And he's clearly having a leg that, for some reason, has a significantly lower volume, right? So I don't think it's a scientific question, it's more of a practical question of thinking it is probably more likely that right leg is going to suffer something, either a hamstring tear or an ACL injury, or if just because from anecdotal experience, Marco. And I don't think that we need, to scientifically prove those things. I think that, it's because it's impossible, because the context changes so much, right?
Context and the environment and everything is all the time changing, but you need to have some kind of patterns. I totally agree with you.
Certainly.
Yeah.
We have the research, from Opars and Ryan Timmy's group in Australia, where they have set, for a particular cohort, they set a threshold in newtons, and when they apply that same threshold, it didn't apply from a different cohort, right? Because there's so many variables as well out there, like habits, recovery, sleeping patterns, perceptions, right? Like there's so many things that can make a substantial difference between a cohort of players and a different cohort of players, right? When we're only measuring one specific, aspect of the player, where there are another 100 that we probably can measure, which are also very important regarding injury risk, right?
That's it. And when you check the injury studies, it's hard to, you mentioned before in the talk, it's hard to predict something, but maybe you can follow some kind of a trend. Previous injury, then you check the asymmetry, then you check the training history, then you check the sleeping habits, then you check the wellness. And if everything is down, well, this is telling me something as a practitioner, okay, I need to react. But if I'm not following this kind of data, maybe I don't have something to take and to react on. And I just read before, I think 2 days or 3 days, it was from Chris Bishop, Dr. Chris Bishop, a great article on Sportsmith about the asymmetries. And I took his article and compared his article and data with our data of these 15 players. And maybe for you, Sebastjan, a question about the asymmetries. What do you think about them, and how do you check on asymmetries if you notice, okay, this guy have 10, 7, 5% difference on the left side compared with the right one?
Yeah, it's again very contextual based. You can have 5% asymmetry and you say, all right, they don't matter. Maybe you want to get them as close as possible, but it's not necessary. But you need to be sure that if you are getting the symmetry levels closer, that it is not because the stronger leg is less strong, but it's because they're both progressing. So it's really, you need to look at the context, and you need to maybe measure a person a few times to make really a proper assessment, conclusion about the symmetry.
The baseline.
Yes, it's not like, all right, now I took the measure once and I know everything I need to do, because the good chance is you probably don't.
It's changing over time.
Yeah, you need to, all right, I make the first measurement, now I will perform a program and then reassess it, and then make another decision. So you need to take it out of context and take a look at it.
Again, the context is the king.
Yes, and this is what we also help you with to make better.
Sorry, Marco. Content is king. Context is God. Like Martin
It's God,
said, right? Context
and that's
is
it.
God.
That's it.
Because it's the article from Chris is fantastic, and it's very important to highlight. Okay, there is an absence of evidence showing if asymmetries have an impact or not. But that means there is an absence. Maybe we still don't have enough subjects, still don't have the right interventions. Maybe we don't have all the information. So it's still a clinically based decision. I tested several ACL athletes, coming back to sport, who are super symmetrical in a double, leg jump, and they become asymmetrical on the single limb, or they're super symmetrical on the single limb and they're not symmetrical on the bilateral move, right? And that depends on a lot of things, because I'll give you an example. If I have a person who normally is not super familiarized with a single leg jump, and most of the single leg jump that he has done is for testing, right? Maybe he's not very good at it. Okay? He's not very good at the test, right? So I can't push him, right? I can't push him to give me your 100% capacity.
To do the test,
Exactly. So then when I look at left or right, because he's not good at it, and we're not asking 100% from his system, we don't see a lot of asymmetries. But when we took him to a double leg, to a bilateral movement, which is something that he's more familiar with, then he puts a lot in, and that's where we see the asymmetry, right? So it's a tricky context dependent. And I'm not a physio, right? And that's not my role, but I would be very reluctant, to determine the return to play process of the player purely from looking at asymmetries from jumping. It's like we said before, it's the whole context and the history that we have.
You need to have whole aspect.
Exactly.
Satisfied it.
Exactly. But, again, anecdotally, I have tested several athletes with, not following the recommended guidelines that you need for ACL discharge, that they had, a re-injury or an injury to the opposite leg, or suffer, muscle strain injuries along the process, which delays their rehabilitation. So, I think it all speaks when to answer that question of when are you coming back, right?
Yeah, that's it. You need. Yeah, sorry. Say, Sebastjan.
Yeah, and it's also important that you don't make your decisions only based on one test. We had a volleyball player. She had ACL surgery. The physios wanted to discharge her because her strength was apparently good enough. We put her on the force decks. We did squats, I think, with 70 kilos. And actually, yes, her operated leg was better than the healthy one. But then, all right, strength was, let's say, good enough. Went into functional movement. So we went into counter movement jump because this is a functional movement to her. And basically, she did almost everything with her healthy leg. So this is clearly not good enough for return to sport, which they wanted to do. So we need to look at the broader context and go from more passive strength to dynamics and to actually try to recreate the movements that actually then happen.
And Yeah, these are all the important aspects: strength, motor control, training age, training history. But I think that also when you are coming back to the field, I think this training history and training load, it's pretty important. You can have a lot of great strength levels in this type of test and in this type of test, but if you haven't done any sprinting or high speed running, or you don't have total distance of 30 kilometers in a week, the last 2 months, and then you come back with a team, this is again not good, because maybe we will put too much load on you in a short amount of time. So we need to think pretty wide about the return to sport. And I like to say about the return to sport, when I speak with my coaches before in the club and everything, we have a great sector about it, that it's the most complex position when you are working with the athlete, because you need to know anatomy, you need to know physiotherapy, you need to know kinesiology, you need to know about the load, you need to know about the football, you need to know about the technical aspects of the sport, you need to know the position. So it's a pretty complex position here. And before we go more to other equipment, and I would like to speak more about the force plates and ForceFrame, because we are using them here, and I think that the listener would like to hear more about it. But before we go on to these two equipments, what do you say? Just one more last thing about the NordBoard. So can you use it for training sessions? To design training sessions, and can you use it every day? And what would be like some kind of a typical protocol for the NordBoard?
Yeah, you can
from your experience.
You can definitely use it for training. It's a great aid. It's been shown that if you give someone a target, they're gonna, work harder. So we can display the previous targets accomplished by the player, or we can set a new target in the iPad app. So we can say, hey Marco, we want you to hit 400. Last test you did 380, we want you to hit 400, and we can work towards that goal, and we can show that progress to the athlete. Okay, so that's one of having immediate feedback is one of the very interesting things, about using the NordBoard. We also have the capacity to do isometric protocols, which are a very interesting way to monitor fatigue as well. Through isometric protocols, you can introduce those sort of protocols in match day +2, match day +3. There's a little paper by Martin Woollin where they show how to monitor hamstring isometric strength and how to use that for as load management tool, and how you can diminish injury risk using a protocol like that. So there are several options how to do it. The system is very amicable. You just need an iPad or an iOS device, and you're going to be seeing that data live. And you can have players going around like in your circuit training, and in that station you can train.
You can test and train.
You can test, exactly right. So it's not taking extra time of your very precious, training time that you have with the players.
So you are using the system as a also testing protocol, but also as a training protocol. So you can train the hamstrings, but you can also check what is happening with the hamstrings. So I think this is a very important aspect, because we are moving from reactive planning to proactive planning, so we can track immediately and we can predict some kind of scenarios, not to do something, then check tomorrow the data, and then we adapt according to the last day. We can change the things during the same event. So this is quite good. This is excellent.
Certainly, and if you have a platform like Ultrax, where you can have the isometric strength plus the CMJ performance plus load indicators plus internal readiness, well, that's where you can create a picture, right? When I was working, with Catapult, we always said to our clients, this is load, this is external load. There are other components that we also need to understand before making a decision of, hey, this player needs to stop, or this player has to do load management, right? You need to create a picture with different colors that you have that make up, performance and load management, right?
Yeah, it's again the whole picture, as we spoke in the return to sport. So you've done a training session. This is internal reaction. Well, from the GPS, you've done that. This is your strength values. This is your internal reaction. And this is your response next day according to, I don't know, wellness or HRV or something like that. So it's a cycle that is happening all the time. So we like to call it here in our company, because we are working with a lot of data scientists and the guys from this sector. It's agile periodization. It's an agile process. So you are doing something, checking, adapting, doing something, checking, adapting, and adapting in the training session. So this is very important. But to move on, guys, I'm really enjoying this discussion. I have a lot of questions and I can ask, a lot of them, but we have our schedule. So let's go back to groin bar and force plates. So what can you tell me about ForceFrame and force plates? What devices are those? What kind of testing you can do with this equipment?
Well, yeah, ForceFrame is a device created to isometrically test, and it was actually, like, as you mentioned before, it was called groin bar at the beginning because you were
that's
only
that's why I'm mixing.
And we rebranded it and renamed it to ForceFrame because it's really modular and you can turn it around, so you can test basically all the joints: shoulder, hip, ankle, you name it. It's a great tool, especially it has, as I said, isometric strength. But same as snowboard, you can also create training protocols. You can set duration. All right, I want this person to be doing 3 contractions seconds on let's say 80% of his maximum, and he just gets a great screen, and he can follow where he is, how hard is he doing, contracting his muscles. So it's a great, as well, again, biofeedback to actually do the isometric exercises. And then, of course, we have the ForceDex. I guess it's probably the most universal tool. I mean, you can do jumping assessments, isometric test assessments, balance, functional tests, which are then especially useful in physiotherapy, such as sit to stand, spot assessment.
That's it.
Maybe more in not only in geriatrics, but you can certainly use it with those people, and also in the early stages of rehabilitation after whichever injury, and lower limbs or upper limbs. So you can do it all.
You remember
Sorry, Marco, something to add to Sebastian's comments. One of the greatest, aspects of ForceFrame is that because it's fixed dynamometry, it substantially increases testing reliability, right? So one of the issues with dynamometry or handheld dynamometry is reliability, right?
You're right. That's great.
If you don't have an external resistance, the chances, of repeating that test and either having similar results or being able to detect a sensible change, that's an issue, right? With standard handheld dynamometry. The good thing about the ForceFrame is that because it's an externally fixed, resistance, and we can control the different positions, and we can also record how that player was positioned for the test, we can have great retest reliability, and also, when comparing subject to subject, right? So that's one of the very aspects from ForceFrame, right?
And that's very important aspect, because I remember when we were testing dynamometry, the hand dynamometry with the physios and so on. So you're not maybe putting the same position all the time when you are testing. So with this kind of equipment, you have start a procedure, the equipment is there in the corner, just go down, sit down, and do your testing. So it's, and it's very important. And what kind of movements can you mentioned, Sebastjan, you can test your head, you can test your shoulder, you can test your legs and so on. And what kind of protocols you have inside that you can test? So is there abduction, adduction type of test? Can you change the degrees and so on?
Yeah, you can do, let's say, if we get stuck here on the hip adduction and abduction, you can test them in, let's say, with extended hips, extended knees, 45, 60 degrees in many different angles. So it's, completely, you can change it and apply it to your use. So you can change it in different positions easily. And it takes you literally 5 seconds to change a position, which again contributes to the ease of the use and to standardization of the protocols.
And Marco, going back to soccer, is your sport. There is, enough evidence showing that, if you have a reduced adductor to abductor ratio, your player might be more susceptible for a groin injury, right? Which is the second most frequent muscular, injury. And that's something that is very quickly tested because the ForceFrame has locils or simultaneously for adduction and for abduction. So we have two set of paddles, right? So when you get the player in position, you do a squeeze, you do a push out, you do a squeeze, you do a push, you do 3 of those, and that's it. And it literally takes you 15 seconds per player to get very, very relevant data, on their isometric strength levels.
So you can immediately, let's say you lay down 45 degrees, you can do your adduction, repetition, then some rest, then you can do your abduction movement, so you don't need to change the position or something like that.
Yep. And in real time.
That's fast, yeah.
And the real time, our iPad is going to show you the ratio between adductor and abductor strength. And if that ratio drops down because the adductors are getting weaker in relation to the abductors, your player could be, at a higher risk of an adductor injury. So monitoring and tracking that is very, very fast and efficient in a high, fast-paced environment like the one that you guys work, right? That you don't have it all the time, right?
So you're again getting your direct feedback on your tablet. You're doing the test, and you can see what is happening with the adductor muscles and with the abductor muscles. So that's again a great feature. And I hope. Well, I can imagine that then you can measure your strength levels. Then again, you can produce force as rapidly as you can, and maybe you can also test, as you said, over time. Maybe you can test endurance. What is happening with your adductors in a longer set than with your abductors in a longer set. So you can test where is the problem: strength, force, rate of force development, or maybe the endurance of the muscles.
Yeah. So first of all, adductor ratio is the ratio. So you still need to check those values because maybe you have a Rubik ratio, but that person is weak both in adductor and abductors. For RFD, I don't think we have that yet in the system, the capacity to measure RFD. We could do it by increasing. So normally RFD measurements market require a little bit of a higher sampling rate, right? If we need to increase the sampling rate, we need to do it with a laptop and do a little bit things manually, right? But and RFD metrics are normally a little bit noisy. And if you're having different people testing at your club, you may have a lot of noise coming in through different people doing the protocol slightly different. So, I would aim, in a multidisciplinary team, more to look at metrics like peak force and those ratios, right? Before introducing concepts like RFD.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned some of the variables right now, but can you tell us what, if someone is using the equipment or your customers, what are the classical or most used variables to check? You mentioned the ratios, you mentioned the force. In the ForceFrame, is there something else that you are checking that could be useful?
We're mostly looking at force. We're mostly looking at peak force.
Mostly force.
Some of my clients would do, like 10 reps to understand is there a substantial drop in strength with the introduction of fatigue, right? Which is an interesting concept. Mostly when we talk about dynamometry, either if it is fixed or if it's not fixed by the dynamo, we talk about force, peak force, and those metrics, right? For the other systems, things can get a little bit more complex.
Complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to keep it simple, Marco. Like I personally try to keep it simple. It doesn't have to get complicated if you know what you're looking for. If you go with a fishing expedition, you're gonna let a lot of different fishes from the sea, right? But if you know what you're looking for, it can get very simple.
That's it. So before we move on to the plates, let's say for the abductors and adductor region, not to go into each test, let's say what would be the values that you are that you noticed in, let's say, football players or soccer players, in the newtons. So what kind of force they produce?
It depends on the age primarily, right? So academy team level players, I think that we're close to the 300, 350, right? I would need to check the normal data right now. Professional players were a little bit higher. We're closer, if I'm correct, to the 420s, or closer to the 500s, if I'm not wrong. So again, I don't remember, the numbers in my head. I can tell you that we have tested rugby players that get to 750, right?
750.
Yeah.
When we test these guys, it was like 300.
Yeah, 300 is probably on the let's say I'm not gonna say below the median, but yeah.
Below the median. I checked. I compared it with the values it in your hub, and it was like that.
Yeah. Like I said, for an adult population, we're closer to above the 400. Somewhere around 420 for the median. So players in the 300 are more likely to be 20% below that median, right? Again, very very context dependent, right?
Yeah. I ask you this question because I know when we start first using the system, we test it on ourselves and then we test it with our athletes. And the biggest question was this, what kind of variables should we check? We need to study the literature a lot to go back. This was the first step, and to know, okay, what are the values for the age, for the injury, and so on. So this was the first two steps, and it helped a lot.
Yeah,
and the last one.
Sorry, one more note on that, Marcos. And Sebas can also probably comment on this. The ForceFrame has a great feature, which is the training mode. So based on the testing that you have done, you can create protocols in our hub, and you can assign those protocols to your players, and that could be part of their training, right? And it's very interesting because you set a target, like we said before, and players have to maintain that strength level through a certain period of time that you can determine for how many reps, etc., etc. So very powerful. Also, implementation is definitely the training mode.
Yeah, so it's besides assessment equipment or diagnostic equipment, it's also a precise training equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and now the last equipment, the force plates. This was when I opened the software, when I checked the number of the variables, especially in the counter movement jump. It was quite interesting and challenging to see what kind of variables should I check. But before we move on to variables, okay, force plate, how does it look like? The function, what kind of test? You already, Sebastjan, mentioned some of them, but maybe there is something more going on the equipment. So what kind of testing procedures you can do, and what variables? I know that we can use one test, then choose the variables in that test, but maybe you can tell me more what are the variables that you are checking and what do you recommend?
So basically up to 35, I think. I don't know the exact number now from my head. Predetermined tests. So you just go into the test, set up the person in the right position, and then you get going. But you have also the option to customize. So you can do some custom tests of some, especially in the isometrics, you can pretty much test whichever muscle group. You could also probably possibly test adductors and abductors, isometric strength of the hamstrings as well. But it depends also now, because here we have like tons of parameters, and now this really depends on the setting. If we use it, it will be completely different, maybe if not completely different, but different parameters than if we are looking at the same test in the steps of patient. So yeah, this is really, again, really context determined, and especially I always like to go case by case. So when I have a client that wants to get an answer from me, which metric should look at, we need to have a specific case, and then we take a look at it. So yeah, if you can either imagine something, or this is then easier to talk about. But again, as with the other, I also like to use also myself the system also for training, because again, you can have feedback and you get also all the parameters right away. So it's
for the readiness.
Yeah, not also only for the readiness. Also, let's say in rehab, our physio more when we are doing, let's say, squats for as an exercise, you can check out the depth, how low did the person go in each squat. So you can say, all right, let's use as your pain as reference point and go as low as you are pain free. And then you can see the first time he can go, 50 centimeters. And then the second time he said, all right, I don't feel any different. We test again, or we train again, and we can see that he can now drop to 25 centimeters instead of 15. So even though he didn't feel a difference, this is the objective data. And it's really also empowering for the patients, and we can help them lose the feel of movement that they acquired through the injuries. It's really nice.
And that's pretty important in rehab, to remove this feeling of being scared of the movement. So yeah, it's also important part.
Especially like in, let's say, chronic pain patients, each of them has some form of kinesiophobia, basically. So it's really important to empower them. Then again, with our different parameters, depends from case to case. You can certainly do that, help with that.
But if you need to tell or to recommend someone, let's say when you were with me the last week, to recommend someone who is new with equipment or who don't have too much knowledge about the jumps and everything, let's say what would be the protocol to use in the force plates. I know that I checked the KISS protocol, Keep It Simple, from Alex Natera. I know that he's using a lot the equipment, and he's publishing a lot of great stuff on social media, and he recommends some different types of tests to use. So what will you recommend, let's say, for me or someone to use on the force plates?
So if you're testing football players, you can do 3 simple tests. You can do either counter movement or squat jump. Pretty much, doesn't matter which one. You can then do the isometric mid-thigh pull or isometric squat, and let's say a drop jump. And you are set for the beginning. And then as you continue on our support part, client success part, we can add different tests for different specific reasons and parameters.
But on that note, Marco, a little bit, I think that a lot of times we need to step back, right? We need to step back and think first, what is it that we're trying to address, right? So what is our purpose? What is our goal? So if our goal is to assess
that's it,
lower limb, power, then the CMJ is a great, right? And the primary output is jump height, right? Jump height is going to be determined by takeoff velocity, which is determined by concentric impulse relative to body mass, right? And there you go. There you have a one indicator, right? I perhaps would like to take that one step forward, right? Or one more step, which is looking at our time model. So reactive strength index modified, which is the jump height divided by the time that athlete has been in touch or in contact with the platform. So we can have 2 athletes, they both jump 40 centimeters. one does it in 800 milliseconds, the other one does it in 650 milliseconds, right? In collective, decision-making sports, we probably want the guy who can do things quicker, right? And that's I think the first thing that we need to think of is what is our purpose, right? What is we're trying to acquire and achieve, right? And then you select the test, and then you pick the most representative metric, because there's a whole host of metrics, and there's a lot of redundancy between metrics, right? We see sometimes, out there, people reporting vertical takeoff velocity and jump height. They're both pretty much self-explanatory. Same thing as, eccentric deceleration RFD, which is how quickly you hit the brakes when you're going down to stop at the squat position, with big negative force, so peak force at the zero velocity moment, right? So those metrics correlates very well, right? So, that's another very important thing that we need to try to avoid, which is redundancy, which is looking at the same thing twice, right? So, from like Sebastjan said, what we try to do from Client Success is try to, help people navigate, those data sets and those variables, and help them, pick the most relevant for their purpose, right? Because if we're talking about performance, we may be looking at, jump height, RSI mode, force at zero velocity. If we're talking about RTP, we may be looking at impulses in the concentric and the eccentric phases. We may be looking at peak force during landing, right? So we might want to look at the asymmetries at different parts of the CMJ, right? Now, the CMJ is measuring what we call a slow strength shortening cycle. Maybe we want to test that athlete in a little bit more, complex situation, which is a fast stretch shortening cycle. That's when we have the drop jumps. That's when we have the single drop jumps, the hop tests, which are a little bit more applicable to sport situations, right? Because the contact times are a little bit less. So I think that first we need to think about the quality. If it's relevant and if it's important for sport, then pick the metric avoiding redundancies and the most representative for that particular, condition aspect that you're trying to measure, and then monitor and understand the variability of that variable over time, right? Because you're gonna see out there that some people suggest looking at fatigue by measuring jump height, right? And saying, hey, you're 1 standard deviation below your normal jump height. The problem is that jump height has a coefficient of variation of 2%. So 1 standard deviation is 2%. So you're going to tell me that you're going to drop an athlete from training, and you're going to tell the coach, hey, Marco is not training because he jumped 2% less? No.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. So that's the part of the journey that we try, to help our clients understanding, which metrics are more noisy, less noisy, which are more susceptible to fatigue changes, and that's part like the journey that we spoken before.
So before moving and choosing the testing procedure, you need to answer to yourself on the questions why and what you want to establish, what you want to check. Then you will decide, I need counter movement jump because of the slow cycle. I want drop jump because of the fast cycle. This guy have previous hamstring injury. I want to check this test, and so on. I think this is definitely very important to our listeners to hear, and everybody who is using different types of equipment, not just the Vald equipment. This is something that we need to have the answer on why we are doing something.
Exactly. That's number one, Marco. And
that's it.
That's number one. In my mind, the two main purposes are improving performance and increasing player availability or sustaining player availability, right? Then from those two main, purposes or reasons that I think that we have working in performance, then we can, create different streams. But it needs to start there. If we're just testing because of testing, then it's a nonsense process.
Yeah, that's it. Well, our job is we want to increase the performance. I want to keep you safe and on the pitch. What I need to do.
Exactly.
That's why I'm testing counter movement, because I'm checking this and that. That will help me to to have you on the pitch.
Certainly. Then if you want, if you have the capacity, right, on a team level to go deep into a player's shape, analyze his curve, understand if, he has a lot of explosive power in the concentric phase, but he's not dropping and breaking fast, that's why it's taking him too long. We can certainly go in there and look at the specifics and what would be the best, most suitable, methods for improvement for a particular player.
For him,
right? Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, that's it. So we can define the profile of him. Where is the problem? Where is the problem in his profile? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses that we should address?
So, Marco,
guys,
apologies, but I gotta get going. I need to.
I know. That's why I'm just wrapping things out. We will cut this part. Guys, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the whole talk and the whole questions and answers that you gave me. I hope that this was also good for you. And thank you one more time for participating. And I hope that the listeners also enjoyed here being with us. I think that they can hear a lot of great things, a lot of great inputs. And I think that we all can agree that the Vald performance equipment is quite useful, not just for testing, but also for creating training sessions and monitoring athletes. I think I can say that if someone from Balkan and Croatia and so on countries are interested in this kind of equipment, that they can contact you guys for more detailed information. And I know that Sebastjan, you have with our guy Yakov a webinar, well, not webinar, live seminar in collaboration with Dynamo that is coming quite soon. So I'm also inviting people to come there to listen about the force plates in live, so they can hear a lot of great things there. One more time, guys, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for having us.